All right, guys, welcome back into another NFL DFS video. My name is Eric Paulzine with 95 Sports. Going to be getting into the top stacks here for Week 4. And guys, there are some really awesome stacks in this one, giving you guys some pretty solid stacks in Week 2 and Week 3. Obviously, Week 2 was the awesome stack of Tua, Waddle, and Tyreek. Hopefully we can have something like that. There is one game that I just love to stack, and I think it's going to be one that you guys can easily stack. Maybe you could get away with doing it in cash as well. Without further ado, though, let's get into it. So before we get into like the DraftKings side of it, I do just want to pull up the stacking report here. So just looking at it, this just calls out, if we're looking at the top running back, the top tight end, the quarterback, and the receiver number 1 in that offense, which stack would be the best? And I just kind of like to use this as a starting point to kind of get us in the right mindset of looking at it. So just based off of that, which stack would be the best stack? It makes a lot of sense. We got the Buffalo Bills going against the Baltimore Ravens. Dawson Knox, he's questionable. He might not play, but you got Devin Singletary, Josh Allen, and Diggs. So some of the best matchups that you'll get on the slate across the board for all of those players. That makes a lot of sense. From there, Philly once again popping up as a great stack like they have been this whole year. No shock there. Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders, AJ Brown. That makes a lot of sense. And then I don't really agree with this, but you got Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, Mark Andrews, and Rashad Bateman. I think that's just because of how awesome Jackson and Andrews have been thus far. We got the Arizona stack of Kyler Murray, Marquise Brown, Zach Ertz, and James Conner. Maybe, we could see that possibly happening. Let's just talk about the best projected value now for a stack. The best projected value, and once again, I think Baker Mayfield has been terrible. Christian McCaffrey is currently questionable as well. I don't know if I would do this, okay, but it is good to look at. DJ Moore, would be more successful if Baker Mayfield could hit him when he's open. That's okay. And then looking at, okay, the Buffalo Bills is actually the second best value stack out there as well. That's kind of crazy. We're going to be stacking the Bills is the biggest takeaway from this. The Atlanta Falcons, they're a team that you could stack. They've been casually popping up as a value stack this whole season because of Drake London, because of Cordero Patterson. Marcus Mariota has been too cheap this whole year, so that's fine. I could see the Denver Broncos being a nice value stack as well, going against the Las Vegas Raiders. That's kind of interesting to me. And then just looking at leverage rank, which stack is your best leverage rank? Well, you could see KC popping up there. I'd be fine with that. Tampa Bay, I don't really like that, but they're low owned. The possibility of Brady, Fournette, Evans having a big game is there. They're not on the main slate, so not a big deal there. And then we got the Broncos. No one wants to play the Broncos because their offense has not looked great, but guys, they still have Russell Wilson. They still have Javonte Williams. They still have Cortland Sutton, all guys that can be productive against the Las Vegas Raiders, which are a terrible team. And then we kind of get it. Okay, so based off of that, let's get into some stacks that I like. So I already mentioned the Buffalo Bills. Let's just touch on that. So Josh Allen is going against the Baltimore Ravens, which have given up, on average, 28.2 DK points. I mean, they gave up 30 points to Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco has not looked good this year, guys. So that certainly is a matchup in which you want to be targeting. Obviously, Josh Allen has went for 30 DK points in every game thus far. He should be locked in at 30 DK points. I do want to point out Devin Singletary did play a lot more snaps last week. Got a lot of targets as well. You could play him. I think there's better running back options out there that you could play. But really what we want to be doing is we want to play Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. So Gabe Davis has played in over 90% of his snaps in those 2 weeks that he has played. The targets haven't exactly been there, but if he's playing that much in this matchup, I think those targets will be there for him. So Gabe Davis does make a lot of sense. I think he's going to be a strong play, especially at that price point. And then Diggs, sure, he's priced up a lot, but he is averaging 30.5 DK points per game. Okay, it's a great matchup. He's averaging over 11 targets per game as well. Those two players are certainly two players I'm going out of my way to play, especially if I have Josh Allen at my quarterback. I think this is a great stack. I think, 30 DK points, and then let's just say 40 between the two. You're setting yourself up very nice there. 70 points from 3 players, very solid. My biggest issue with this stack is that I don't really see anyone we can run it back with. The last couple of weeks, we've been running it back with Mark Andrews. I don't know. I don't really like the matchup there. I think the Buffalo Bills defense is pretty solid as a whole, even with a bunch of backups in their secondary. From there, a casual, sneaky stack, I think, is going to be the Dallas Cowboys game. The issue that I have with it is I don't really want to play either the quarterbacks for example purposes. Let's put Cooper Rush in there. I think you could just go with a different value quarterback if you wanted to, because I think they have more upside than him. But CeeDee Lamb is still too cheap. 6.7 for his production for the amount of snaps he's getting, over 90% of the snaps for the Dallas Cowboys, getting over 11 targets per game, or at least 11 targets per game. The guy's a stud. This is a good matchup against the Commanders. This is a matchup in which we've been targeting a lot. This is the Commanders, the Lions, and the Baltimore Ravens are the teams you want to be targeting right now, especially via the passing game. CeeDee Lamb, going against the Commanders is something that's highly intriguing to me, especially at this low price point. Like, he should be able to go off. The targets, the playing time has been there. Should be a safe play. And then Noah Brown as well, playing in over 80% of the snaps as well. I think he's a solid play. 7, 5, 9 targets, over 10 DK points in every game. Once again, given the matchup, he should have a solid game. Guys, this is their easiest matchup of the year thus far. Sure, it's a divisional game. You worry about that a little bit, but this stack should be a solid stack. And then you could even play like McLaurin as well, who, week 1 didn't really do much, did score 13.8 DK points, 8 targets then in week 2, 9 targets in week 3. Like, we like to see that. He's just a little bit too risk reward, and I would just much rather play CeeDee Lamb. But if you're trying to game stack this game, you could play him. But like, we're playing Curtis Samuel almost for sure. I mean, he's getting 11 opportunities per game at the receiver spot at 5.7. He is still too cheap. He's the number one weapon in this offense, and he's a player that you want to be targeting. Curtis Samuel still too cheap. This is a very solid game stack. And then let's just assume, in this stacking purposes, they're playing from behind. The Commanders are. Then J.D. McKissic would be a play. We saw them play from behind the last 2 weeks. He had 7 and 9 targets in those games, over 10 DK points. But like, you don't have to play them. There's better value price points out there at the running back spot that you could go with. And I'll get into one of those right now. The Seattle Seahawks versus Detroit Lions game is an awesome game to stack. There's so much value out here in this game that you could really make any line of path you want work, and it should be a pretty solid stack. I did kind of tease a running back that's too cheap. Let's just start with Rashad Penny. Very cheap, given the matchup with Detroit. They've been a bottom 5 defense against the run, giving up a lot of points to opposing running backs. He had 15 opportunities last week. I do expect those opportunities to go up once again for him. Rashad Penny at 4.9 as the starting running back, as someone that's gained 69% of the snaps, is too cheap. Rashad Penny is a player I'm going out of my way to play, especially in a game stack. But the problem with Rashad Penny is that all the other Seattle Seahawks are too cheap. So like, you could play him, but then we got Geno Smith at 5.4, who's also too cheap. 2 out of the 3 games, he's been very successful. The one game he wasn't was kind of a natural letdown spot against the Niners, where he only scored 7 DK points. Guys, he put up 17 DK points against the Denver Broncos. We are seeing that the Denver Broncos are one of the best defenses in the league. He had a good game against the Falcons, who have been a very solid defense as well. This is going to be by far his best matchup going against the Detroit Lions. Once again, they're just not a good defense. They've given up a lot of points. They've been in a lot of shootouts. Geno Smith should be able to go off in this game and at least be able to hit value at this price point. It's very easy to stack Geno with his pass catchers. We got DK Metcalf, who hasn't exactly had a blow-up game just yet. Okay, he's kind of been kept in check, and that could possibly happen again. Jeff Okudah has been playing better this season thus far, especially last week as well. I do kind of worry about DK Metcalf a little bit, but the price point isn't like too much. I think I'd rather play CeeDee Lamb, though, at 6.7 than I would DK Metcalf, and maybe that's just a one-off thing that you do. Just because the stack's there doesn't mean you have to play it. But like, for example purposes, we'll put him in there. And then Tyler Lockett as well. Tyler Lockett's simply way too cheap. And that's why these two were on the cover. Geno Smith and Tyler Lockett. 2 players that are both way too cheap. Okay, Tyler Lockett, the last 2 weeks, 11 and 11 targets, over 16 DK points in both of those, averaging 15 DK points. Gets a great matchup against the Detroit Lions. Like, Tyler Lockett should be able to go off and have a huge productive game. At least a safe floor as well. Awesome start to the stack here, the game stack. And then from there, we got DeAndre Swift out. So Jamal Williams at 6.1, firmly in play. Like, he should be priced as much as DeAndre Swift at 7.1. We are getting $1,000 in savings with Jamal Williams, someone that's probably going to get around 20 total opportunities in this game. If they need to, if Detroit's down, they can throw the ball to Jamal Williams. They might not need to, though, because Seattle has had a weakness in the running game as well. So like, Jamal Williams, a super cheap price point play as well, a solid play for you. And then from there, St. Brown's out for the Detroit Lions. So that means like DJ Chark or maybe both of them, but Josh Reynolds, they're going to be in a solid role as well, getting over 70% of their snaps. I think I'd rather just go with Josh Reynolds, who's a little bit cheaper, but both of them could have a big game. They're both going to step into a slightly better role. Like, DJ Chark has certainly kind of let some nice games slip through his fingers, literally. And Jared Goff has kind of missed him on a couple of plays as well. I like both of them. You could play either one of them. You could play both of them if you want to. And once again, for example purposes, here we go. This is the build already. You could throw TJ Hawkinson in there, who we kind of expect to have a better role as well. One of the weaknesses the Seattle Seahawks defense has again been against opposing tight ends. So maybe that's a route that you go as well. He should see around 7 targets and like so much salary left over to do really whatever we want to make whatever upgrades you want to make from there. Like, let's say you don't want to play Rashad Penny because you don't want to dip a quarterback and a running back together. That's fine. That's perfectly understandable. Let's just go with Khalil Herbert, who I think is a solid value play on this slate. And then let's say you don't want to play both Detroit Lions. That's fine. Or both Detroit Lions receivers. That's fine with me. I get it. Let's go CD Lamb. I talked about it. He's a great value price point play. And then you still have way too much left over there. It's insane. Like, you can make so many strong lineup paths work. Heck, you can even pay for Josh Allen at quarterback instead if you wanted to go that route. It's insane, guys. I like it a lot. And then Philly versus Jacksonville, probably not a game that you want to go crazy with stacking wise, but these offenses have both been great. You know, Jalen Hurts I like a lot as a game stack. I would rather play Josh Allen as my quarterback, as my number one quarterback. I had $200 difference between him and Jalen Hurts, but going against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he could have a good game. Now, they did shut down Justin Herbert, but they weren't keeping him honest running the ball. Like, they knew he wasn't going to run the ball, so they're just getting a lot of pressure on him. Jalen Hurts, you know, definitely can run the ball. He could easily have a good game. Then you got A.J. Brown playing a lot of snaps, averaging 11 targets per game, getting over 10 DK points per game, certainly in play at 7.4. Once again, I'd rather play CD Lamb at that same price point. You got Christian Kirk at 6.6, a guy playing 90% of the receiver snaps, you know, getting targeted a lot, getting used a lot, averaging 21.9 DK points. Still a little bit too cheap for that production that he's been getting. Zay Jones is currently questionable. If he sits, that should only mean that Christian Kirk and Marvin Jones are going to get more targets. Marvin Jones is pretty cheap. He'd be a player that I like a little bit more than. And then receiver-wise, Devonta Smith is definitely still too cheap. Just across the board. Like, you don't even have to play him just as a stacking play. At 5.8, he is certainly too cheap. I mean, he looked elite against the Commanders. Once again, the Commanders are a team that you want to attack, but he had two awesome catches against the Commanders. 5.8, still too cheap. And we got a solid game stack just starting right there. Then lastly, a very low-owned stack that I like, just given the price points, is going to be the Jets and then running it back with Deontay Johnson. So Zach Wilson is back, and you know, he's at a cheap price point now. Joe Flacco, he's been productive for fantasy purposes, hasn't really looked good. He's looked kind of bad. And that's where DFS and football kind of can be different, because he has been productive DFS wise, which encouraged me for Zach Wilson. There's been a lot of plays in which if Joe Flacco could run the ball, he could have got like 15 yards rushing the ball, which is something that Zach Wilson will be able to do, and he can keep defenses honest. And then we just look at Garrett Wilson, you know, getting a ton of targets, you know, averaging 11 per game. That's awesome. He's only playing in like 60% of the snaps, so that's a worry, but at 5.4, certainly still too cheap. Elijah Moore, been open a ton. Joe Flacco just hasn't been able to hit him. He's playing in over 90% of the receiver snaps. Very solid play, I think, at 4.8 in a game that you want to game stack. Like, the Steelers have not been as good as they once were on defense. You know, when TJ Watt went out, that defense slowly but surely started to get worse. Elijah Moore at 4.8. With Zach Wilson now throwing in the ball, that should help him, because you know, he's been open. Joe Flacco has just been missing him. And then Tyler Conklin, still too cheap. He's playing in over 90% of the snaps for the Jets, has seen over 7 targets per game, over 10 DK points per game, still too cheap at 3.6. I don't get what's going on there. And then you could run it back with Deontay Johnson, who's also just like, I don't get it. Why does DraftKings hate Tyler Conklin and Deontay Johnson? Like, this guy's been too cheap for over a year and 4 weeks now. It's weird. And like, you could definitely just play him. Probably his best matchup of the year thus far. But that's all I have for you guys for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a like and subscribe. That helps me help you guys out. Helps me provide more content for you guys. But let's have a good slate. That's all I have, guys. So as always, let's keep cashing.